You got your Bibles. Go ahead and turn to Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2. As we look at the Christmas story. Hopefully I've been pretty clear. If you've been keeping up over the last few weeks. We've been talking about a Christmas series, a season of promise. This is a season of promise. In a very superficial sense, it's a season of promise because of what you might get for Christmas. Especially with the kids, right? It can be a season of promise waiting to open up and see what's under the tree, what those presents are. It's also a season of promise as we prepare ourselves for a new year. It's pretty neat. Last Wednesday, when I was over with the Bible study on Wednesday morning, we're not having it this week, so I told them, see you next year, right? Because 2019 is right around the corner, right? We got to hope that it's better, or at least not worse than the past one. That's what everybody looks forward to as they go into the next new year. By the way, if you want black eyed peas and collard greens, come over to my house, and Nicole will make them for everybody, right, Nicole? Okay. And so, New Year's Day, we're excited about that. But a season of promise that we've been looking at started in Genesis chapter 3. Right after the fall, God begins to make a promise that He's going to save His people. But we picked it up with Abraham's story. And we started looking at the promised offspring, one who's going to be a blessing to all the nations. Jump forward to David. And remember where we got this from, Matthew chapter 1. If you read the genealogy in Matthew 1, you see it broken up into 3 sections. Abraham, David, and then the return from exile. And so after we talked about David, we talked about this promised king, and it wasn't him. Even though he was such a good king, he had his downfalls, as many of us well know. We know much about David's story. And then we also know that his kingdom didn't last forever. His lines were dead, and he died. Right? We hear about it later in the scriptures. It talks about David was buried, and his bones were still there today. But then it starts talking about the return. And so last week, we looked at Jeremiah 32. We heard about him buying land, even though the whole entire land's about to be destroyed. Why would he do that? Because there was a promise that they were going to return back, that something was going to be different in the future. And so the entire Old Testament, this season of promise, works its way up as we've been thinking about Advent and all these different things, until we get to the promised one, Jesus Christ. See, this is a season where the entire Old Testament is constant stumblings and its desperate longing for God meets its culmination with Emmanuel, God with us. So follow along as we read Luke chapter 2, verse 1. In those days a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and all went to be registered each to his own town. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and he wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. And in that same region, there were shepherds out in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were filled with great fear. And the angel said to them, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be a sign for you. You will find a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger." And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among those with whom He is pleased." When the angels went away from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go over to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has made known to us." And they went with haste, and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in a manger. And when they saw it, they made known the saying that had been told them concerning this child. And all who heard it wondered at what the shepherds told them. But Mary treasured up all these things, pondering them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, as it had been told them. And so we have the birth story, the Christmas story in Luke chapter 2. Of course, you hear about it in Matthew as well. John seems to skip it. He goes right into the fact that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We hear that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So you almost have the Christmas story in one verse right there. But here in Luke chapter 2 is probably one of the most well-known ones. We have the whole idea of them going for the census, Jesus being born, and the angels and the shepherds in the field. So I was having a lot of fun as I was praying and preparing this message, because we got some points, and y'all, the points are Christmas hymns. And I'm not just being cheesy. I think they fit perfect, right? The first one is Silent Night. Silent Night. See, we pick up the Christmas story here with a focus on the ruler at the time and a decree that there's going to be a census. But that's not something for us to just breeze over really fast either, right? We get this idea that they were traveling. But, y'all, what are the chances that they call for a registration, a census, just at the time for Mary to deliver? You say, it could happen. It could be a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. It could happen. It could be a coincidence, but it's not. This was God's design. Why? Because Jesus' hometown was what? Nazareth. Right? We hear about him all the time in the Gospels. But where was he born? Bethlehem. And why did that matter so much? Micah 5, chapter 2. Micah 5, verse 2. I'm not going to read it to you. But there, the Old Testament prophet says that there's going to be a ruler, and he's going to be born in Bethlehem. And so what does God do? Well, a baby who's supposed to come from Nazareth has to make his way up to Bethlehem for a census, where he's expected to be born. And so he comes, right? God is a promise keeper. He's a promise answerer. And so we know the story, right? She gets there, and Mary gives birth to the child and lays him in a manger, now because there was no room for him at the inn. Now, I know some people get really caught up sometimes over some of the details or different things that we hear about the Christmas story. I talked about some of these Wednesday night. In fact, if you were here Wednesday night, I told you I wasn't just picking on Christmas songs, right? We sung them all today. We had Away in the Manger, We Three Kings, Glory and Honor. And if you weren't here, you don't know what I'm talking about, so shame on you. No, I'm just seeing with you. Anyway, we were picking on different things and talking about some of the stories that you hear. Here were some popular ones, right? People that like to complain, or they read a book somewhere and they're like, well, Jesus probably wasn't born in like a barn. It was probably a cave. And some people, no, it wasn't a cave. It was actually a house, and it was the first floor of the house where they kept the animals, and that's where they had it. Right? And people debate all these things. You know what the answer is? I'll tell you the answer. We don't know. Right? None of us were back then. We could read different history books and different things like that, but you know what? We do know one thing. He was laid in a manger. Another thing that people sometimes pick on is that there was no room for him at the inn. If you've ever seen any funny cartoons of it or something like that, or on TV, they always have some mean people that looks like he ran them off. That very well not have been the case. There was a census. The inn could be full. Right? There could have been a lot of reasons. All we know is that there wasn't room for him at the inn. I say all that to say we don't need to get too caught up in these details and we speculate on them. What I think is really interesting here is that the entire Old Testament reaches its culmination one quiet night in a small town as God takes on flesh and is born as a feeble baby. Yeah. Think about it. Go back to VBS or Sunday school. You're thinking about all your Old Testament stories and you hear about the awesome things. When Moses parts the Red Sea and you hear about David taking on the different armies, or we're going back again in Abraham taking Isaac on that mountain to sacrifice it. All these stories looking forward to something. We even think about Ruth, and if you remember in the book of Ruth, what's the importance of the book of Ruth? Why is it there? 4 chapters in the middle of the Old Testament. What's Ruth got to do with anything? Well, if you get to the end of Ruth and you realize that Ruth and Boaz get together, and what does it say? The very last part of the book is a genealogy. They're going to have a child, and that child's going to lead to this child, and eventually it's going to lead to David. Right? There's going to be a king. There's going to be a line that continues. Right? The entire Old Testament's looking forward to something. We get to the prophets, and Isaiah starts talking about this suffering servant, the one by whose stripes we're healed. The one who came and really was of no glory to himself, and he wouldn't even be handsome enough for you to want to turn your face at him. In other words, not saying that he was ugly, but just making a point that this was going to be somebody special that the world wouldn't take 2 looks at sometimes. In the West, plenty of times it happened with Jesus. when he was doing something for them. Right? Many crowds followed Jesus, and what do? They followed him because guess what? If you follow Jesus, you get free food and free health care. And then he says, yeah, I get it, you guys. I fed 5,000 and I cured your diseases. But if you really want to be my follower, you have to eat of my flesh and drink of my blood. And it says at that time, many turned from following. It was a hard saying. They didn't realize that there was more they had to buy into here than just following Jesus around for the things he had to offer. Because, other than that, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. It says he came to his own rejected him. And so we hear about that in Isaiah. And then you have Malachi, and you have this period of 400 years as they're just waiting to hear from God again. When's the next prophet? Give us a word. And we have it here in verse 7. They get to Bethlehem, and it just says, she gave birth to her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger. Because there was no place for him in the end. Boom! The promised one comes. Christmas night. And so, this period of expectation is something we well know. This is a little silly, but this is a common experience. You ever sit at a particularly long red light before? The thing is, you probably know where that red light is too. It's part of your normal commute, and even though you know that that red light is so long, you still make that turn and you stop at that red light and you wait. Right? I have one that I go by, and if it's green, when I see it from a distance, I don't even turn, because I know it's going to turn yellow by the time I get there, and I'll be sitting there for 20 minutes, right? So, well, we all have that red light, and we go to it anyways, and we sit there, and what do you do when you're waiting at that long red light? You look at the other light, and you see if it's turning yellow, if it's still green, and then you're waiting, and you're like, all right, it's my turn, and then a turn light comes on, it still ain't your light, somebody's turning now, and now you got to wait for them, and so you're looking around, and then eventually you just lose hope altogether, and you feel that phone that buzzed a while back, but you didn't look at it because you ain't texting and driving, right? Good. But now you're sitting at a red light, and so you're like, I guess I got time, this thing's going to take forever, and you pull it out, and you're seeing who that missed call was, and then what happens? It turns green so quick because, boom, green. And it sometimes catches you by surprise. You've been waiting forever, and now you're the one going slow. People blowing the horn at you to go. Right? We've probably been there. We know what that light's like. It comes and click, it's green, and it waits seems so long, but then it comes and it startles you. Well, that's an everyday thing. The light's always going to turn green. But think about the fact what these Jews were waiting for. Answer to these great and awesome promises. Every time they thought they had it, it wasn't enough. All right, we got King David. We're good. The kingdom will last forever. And David messes up with Bathsheba. Then David has Solomon. David dies. Solomon comes. Seems like he's going to be great. Wisest man that ever lived, right? And then he marries a bunch of women. Lead his heart astray. Wasn't too wise to have 700 wives, right? But he marries, leads his heart astray. After him, the kingdom splits, and now they're starting to wonder what in the world's going on here. God made a promise to us. When's he going to keep it? And it came. It came in God himself that took on flesh, right? What have you been waiting for your entire lifetime? Maybe you've been living life with a season of expectation. You've been waiting for an answer to something. I'm here to tell you that the answer is only found in Jesus Christ. The gaping hole that you have is only found in him. And if you're a believer and you still feel that at times, it's because you've forgotten. He's still the same God. He's never changed. He was the one that was there with you that day. I don't know where it was. Maybe you were at a youth camp. Maybe you were at VBS. Maybe it hadn't been that long ago. But you remember that time when you prayed that prayer, when you trusted Christ and he changed your heart, he changed your life from the inside out, gave you a new heart. And you remember the joy that you had. He's still the same. That joy is still the same. He's still the answer. The hope, joy, and peace that we've been missing came into existence on Christmas Day. And so then we see, number 2, hark, the herald angels sing. Hark, the herald angels sing. The story shifts scenes after this baby's born, and it takes us to the shepherds out in the field keeping watch over their flock by night. But they aren't the focus yet. It just sets us up in the field. It tells one little verse about him, but then it's all about the angel, right? He pops up out of nowhere. He appears to them, and he has a message for them. The glory of the Lord breaks through the darkness of night. They're in the presence of an angel. Of course they shake with fear. You'd do the same. We all would. But then the angel begins to speak. He declares the birth of the Savior. Now we're going to look a little more at their message piece by piece. But what I think is important here, right, is that first, he has a little bit of the answers to the promises we've already been looking at. He says this child is going to be a great joy to all people. As Abraham was told that there's going to be one who's a blessing to all the nations. He says that this child is going to be born in the city of David. He's of the line of David, just as we're told that David, you're going to have a kingdom that never ends. He's the promised king. And then when the message is completed, I love it. They thought they were scared by one. He finishes up and it says an entire heavenly host shows up behind him and begins to sing, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among those with whom he is well pleased." Man. Some of y'all might not be big into Christmas. Nicole will tell you, I like Christmas a lot. I'm not David Clardy Christmas, right? He's got it going on. But I like Christmas a lot. I'm probably just not that driven. But that being said, I like every holiday. I mean, if you catch me around Thanksgiving, there's not many Thanksgiving movies, but I'm going to try to find them, right? Easter, I don't know about buying that Easter outfit. That's expensive. But I'll eat eggs, right? And all these different things, I love it. But I'm here to say, if you're not a Christmas person, it's not a big deal. You don't have to look like you fell from the North Pole. You don't have to be all about the red and the green. But what you better be about is the fact that Christ took on flesh. The fact that we can have that joy to sing glory to God in the highest and peace on earth among those. He has earth and peace among those with whom He's well pleased, right? He's the one that's bringing promise. That should get your spirit stirring, whether you have a light on your house or not, whether you have a tree up or not. It's all about Him, right? And you want to talk about news. These angels bring the news. Today we have a lot of different types of news. We all know them. What's the different types of news? First of all, there's fake news. That's pretty popular in the political stream, right? We hear that a lot, especially 2018. That could probably be added to the dictionary of its own thing. We got fake news. We have old news. Old news is pretty much something that's a day old or now sometimes even hours old. We get news so fast at our fingertips, we don't have to wait for it to be in print after a couple hours. It can already be outdated, right? Stuff becomes old news. That was yesterday. Right? And then, rarely do we ever have it, good news. But here, I want you to look at this. This isn't fake news. They bring the news, but it's not fake. He was born, He lived, He died, and He rose from the dead, never to die again. Jesus Christ is not a fairy tale. He's firmly planted in history, born in the Middle East. Many historians will talk about it. Many don't want to talk about the fact that He rose from the dead. They try to explain that away because they don't believe in Him. But they can't deny the fact that He was around, that He lived, that He did miraculous things, and that many followed Him. We know the reason He did all that is because He was God. This isn't old news. Some things get old after a few hours, but this news has been around over 2,000 years, and it still brings powerful life change even today. And y'all, this isn't bad news. This is one of those rare things we don't get much. This is good news. Good news of great joy. Look what the angel says. It says, "Fear not." What you scared of? What's been plaguing your mind, causing you to fret? Stop it. God's good purposes are worthy of our trust, and they're great. You got nothing to be scared of. Second thing, as I've already said, good news. Is it the same old bad news that we see on TV? Number 3, great joy. And I'm not talking about happiness. I'm not talking about something that has to do with what you're going through in the season. Christmas can be hard for many people because they've lost loved ones. Maybe recently, maybe around Christmas. We even had some recently that we've been praying for. Extended church family and friends. They've lost loved ones just in the past week or so. That can be hard. That doesn't make for a necessarily happy time. But happiness doesn't have anything to do with joy. Joy is deep. It wells up in you. And you can even have joy in the midst of tears. He says, I'm not bringing you something that makes you happy like a little present that you wrap and then you break in the next hour. I'm bringing great joy, something that stands the test of time. He continues, he says, who is he? He's Christ the Lord, the promised one. He's the answer. He's the Messiah who's going to save the world. And he did so by crossing the grave. He says, glory to God in the highest. We glorify God. He's the one worthy, and He's good. And then finally he says, and on earth, peace among those with whom He's well pleased. Peace. This is a peace that makes no worldly sense. This is not peace from your circumstances. It's peace from worry in the midst of your circumstances. This is peace in the midst of the storm, knowing that the God who has you is the God of the storm. The silent night that we hear about as Jesus is born, He goes and He's laid in a manger. It becomes a night filled with praise as angels bust through and the herald angels sing and tell the shepherds the good news. And then finally, another great Christmas song, O come, all ye faithful. It says, when the angels went away, verse 15, from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, let us go over to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has made known to us. The choir leaves, and the shepherds are left dumbfounded in the field. So what do? Well, they go check it out. You hear that kind of news, you go check it out. And so they go to see the child. Now you might know a little bit about these shepherds. They were considered to be in the lower rung of society. Their job made them ritually unclean, so people didn't like them too much because, well, they couldn't go into the temple. They couldn't do different things because they were always working with animals. But it's important for us, too, not to romanticize the shepherds too much. Now, this is still stuff that we're speculating in history, but oftentimes you hear this and we think, boy, poor shepherds out in the field. People didn't like them because they took care of animals. But some history says, well, they might have actually lived up to their name. People think many of the shepherds might have been very dishonest, maybe even thieves. But that's even more fitting. See, Jesus Christ came, and the fact that He came to the humble shepherds is amazing. But He came, if you remember, not to die for good people, but to die for sinners like us. One of the sweetest verses in the Bible was Romans 5:8. Right? For while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Not for while we were getting our act together, Christ died for us. Not for while we messed up every now and then, Christ died for us. No, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While everything we did was against Him, we had no chance of making it to heaven, so God said, I'll become a man and I'll do it for you. And He did that. He came to the sinners. He even tells the Pharisees later, who are full of themselves and they think they're righteous, He says the physician didn't come to fix those who think they're healthy. I think that's the key, right? Think they're healthy. He said He came to cure the sick. And so they see the child, and then I love it. They begin to make all that they had heard about Him known. Mary treasures these things in her heart. Now, verse 20, it says, and the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, as it had been told them. You ever heard some juicy news you can't wait to be the first one to share? Such as maybe a baby announcement or something like that. We have all that all the time now. We have entire parties where people gather just to watch somebody cut a cake and see what color the cake is. It's blue or is it pink? Right? Or the smoke's going to come out. Or I seen one that was on Facebook or something. Some dummy did the thing where he shoots the target and it blows up, but he ain't got a little bit bigger explosion than I think he was banking on, and everything caught on fire. But it was a boy, right? Right? So, we have all these different things where we love to just throw all this news. I even remember me and Nicole first heard about Janie. It ate us up inside before we could tell our moms. And then, boy, telling at least my mama it was a dangerous thing because, Mama, don't put it on Facebook. Don't tell nobody. And it eat her up, too. They're just waiting. I remember my mom would ask every other week, we telling anybody yet? We telling anybody yet? And then, boom, as soon as we put something out, she was right there. Right, letting everybody know about it. We can't hardly hold back that kind of news. So my question is, why don't we share this news? The King has come. The Bible shift gears, And now, I think it's awesome when we see these shepherds because it also shows a shift in everything. The time's come to spread and make it known. Starting from the shepherds. Of course, Jesus is going to have his earthly ministry. He's going to have the 12 that follow him. He disciples them one-on-one. He teaches them because they're going to be leaders of the church. Peter and Paul and all these different guys. They're going to be going and doing missionary journeys. And so he's preparing them for that. He dies. They don't know what's going on, but they still stay together. He rises from the dead. He begins to teach them anymore. If you remember what he tells to Peter as he's feeding him, and he says, Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. And he tells it to him 3 different times, right? He does all these different things, preparing his followers. But in the midst of all this, it's all right, guys. I came. I ushered in the kingdom. I'm the one that everybody was looking for, the Messiah. I'm bringing good news of great joy, and I'm going to do it by taking the lashes that you deserve. I'm going to go die on that cross. I'm going to raise from the dead. And when I leave here, I'm coming back. But y'all, I got a job for you to do. Make it known. And so Peter and Paul give their entire lives to the mission, and the church grows like wildfire because they acted like these shepherds who heard the news. And maybe they were sinners. Maybe they were definitely sinners, but maybe they were some of the worst sinners. Maybe they didn't have their act together. Maybe they were thieves. But when they seen Jesus, they knew it. And they couldn't hold it back. They told everybody they could about him. They glorified God through it. And we don't know anything else about him after that fact, but I can guarantee you that probably changed their lives. You know, we have the same calling today. We got a message that brings hope to a world that's full of darkness. That's what we rally behind. That's why this church exists. And so now what we say is, come all ye faithful and trust Christ if you have it. And to the church we say, come all ye faithful and reach the world. That's what Lottie Moon's about. That's a very practical way of us to give resources to help reach the world. But y'all, we've got people that are our neighbors that have never heard. You'll probably hear me share this again, but never think just because you live where you live that everybody's heard about Jesus. They haven't. They haven't. I was working in high school. There was this boy, he was my age, he was working there too. It wasn't a place where many young guys worked, so we were kind of friends. I was talking to him, and I caught him reading his Bible, and he was reading in Genesis. And I thought, man, he must be devoted, right? Not that Genesis isn't good, but, you know, when I was growing up, you just try to stay with things that you hear all the time, so I was always in Matthew or John or something like that. So, well, he's reading all the way early in the Old Testament, and I got to question him about it, asking him, I said, you just reading the Old right now? And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, do you read any about Jesus or Paul or any of those guys? Didn't know what I was talking about. So you know this Old Testament and New Testament? Nope, didn't know it. He told me the story of the Good Samaritan, but he didn't know that came from the Bible. He just heard of that as a parable. He said, I heard this story before, I liked it. And I said, that's actually the book you're reading. And when I said Jesus, he didn't know it. That was Landrum, South Carolina. So we're talking just down the road here. The Bible Belt, where everybody knows about God and Jesus. No, they don't. You know, we got a mission, and it's in our backyard. So we say, come all ye faithful and reach the world. That's where we get it. It says the season of promise finds its answer in the Christ of Christmas. And that Christ is the Savior of the world. As you stand and David comes to lead us in the hymn of invitation. The invitation is this. Do you know that Savior? If you don't, man, there's no sweeter time to know Him than today. I tell you, Christmas will be a lot better when you know the one who it's all about. Come down and I can tell you how to do that. Maybe you're here today and you've been struggling with that joy and that peace in the season. Maybe you've gotten caught up in the hustle and bustle of it and you forgot what it's all about. Maybe you need to take some time to do business with the Lord and talk to Him. Maybe you haven't been obedient. Whatever you need to do, be obedient to the Lord now. Today is the day, as we sing, "Oh, come all ye faithful."